It's Stevivor Friendly Fire Show, episode 233 for the second half of March 2023. I am Steve Wright, and I am on a quest to save the president's son. And that's my co-host, Ben Salter. How are
President's
you?
son. Thank well.
I can call you
Don't
the
know how I
president's
can match
daughter
that.
if you want. It's the president's daughter, Ben Salter.
Ooh, fantastic. I'm good, Steve. I've been speech writing today. I need to do a speech at my sister's wedding on the weekend. So the last speech I gave was at your wedding, which was a long time ago, and I can't remember what to do. So I'm just going to be like, I'm here, you know.
I'm sure your
So I
sister
just
will
went.
appreciate that. Congratulations to Gemma and Preston? Preston. No, Preston. I got it right the first time. Why'd I doubt
Yeah.
myself? Damn it. They're not going to listen to this anyway, so I'm safe.
I'm
Hopefully.
this is all material for the speech. I need to pad 5 minutes. It's going in. I'm going to start with that.
So this one time I was talking about the groom's name to my friend, and that was a riveting piece of conversation, just like
Okay.
this is. Let's talk about video game adjacent things, events, big events, not your sister's wedding, sadly, or not sadly, depending on how it goes. I'm trying to segue into PAX AUS 2023, horribly
Back.
so. Back. Well, I guess PAX AUS 2022 was back. You just didn't get to go because I
That's
had
true.
COVID, and I obviously had COVID. So
That's right. I forgot about that. Never mind. 2023 is here. I'm not going to be there either, but you could be there, listener, because tickets are on sale, or they're going to be on sale, or not a fact-based show. One of those things. I think they're on pre-sale or something like that, which is sale.
it's like an early bird sale now. You're not coming for sure. Was that admission? You
Yeah,
see no
absolutely.
value in PAX AUS?
I see heaps of value in PAX AUS. It's just that I myself am getting married like a few weeks later, so I will not be going to PAX just beforehand.
Fair enough. So
Yeah.
you're not on your honeymoon. You're not at the wedding, but you've got stuff to do, like write a speech. I'm imagining.
I don't think so. That's like the one thing I get out of my own wedding is barely any speech. Someone else can do the speeches.
I'll have to. Well, I'm assuming I'll have to write a speech. That was really presumptuous of me. Actually, I'm gonna just walk.
You already have a role.
I'm gonna walk that back.
You're MC, Steve. You already agreed to do that role, so
Well, I
you
don't
are
know if
going to have
that's
to speak.
that's not necessarily a speech though. So
Well, you got to warm up the crowd. I don't know.
Maybe
I
I'm
don't know
safe.
what an MC does. You need to. You figure that out.
I don't know. I gotta buy a suit or something that fits.
You've got the role. You figure out what that is. That my part's done.
I can do that. Did I tell you? Because I think we've sort of talked about fitness chat lately. I went for a 10K run the other day. It was actually like 9.7K because my ankle started to hurt. But like that set off this chain reaction across my back that has led to like 3 or 4 weeks of just nonstop back pain. So that's been
So
fun.
don't run is your advice. All right.
Well, apparently it's not even my back, it's my hip flexors. And I'm like my pelvis is tilted forward weird, like an old man, kind of like starting to curve over. So
Yeah.
I need to address that. So how's that for podcast banter, Ben?
Oh, look, that's good stuff. That's real. You're getting real on this show. I don't know. That's just called being old. Like you have to put up with this stuff. If you're going to try to run 10Ks, you need to expect this type of thing. So good on you for hitting 9.7.
Well, I've signed up for the 10K Melbourne one, and there's a 14 city to surf in Sydney. So it only gets worse from here.
That's worse. The Adelaide one's 12K, so you can increment up, but I don't think they're in order. That would be smart.
No, thank you. But thank you. I don't know why we're taking so much time to talk about something good. My back is not good in many senses, but let's talk about Resident Evil 4 now that, one, but by the time you hear this, the game is out. Two, Ben, your review is out. My guides are pretty much out, depending on when you listen to this, and we both, I've probably put in 30, 35 hours of this game. I'm not sure how many
Ooh, wow.
times you've replayed it, if at all. That's not a requirement.
No, one and done for me, but that's all you really need to do. If you would like to keep playing, you can, of course. There are various modes and things. That's actually a good place to start because when you first load this game, it will suggest to you if you played it before, or played the old version before, you should play on hardcore or whatever it's called. If you played RE4, the original version, standards people who is familiar with games but haven't played this before. I would disagree. I think hardcore is too hard the first time you play it. Don't know about you. It's like unfun level. Like even standard is harder than the original game, and it's a good balance, or at least a better balance. And I'm sure hardcore is good, and maybe I just need to get good. but I didn't think it was that fun. I think on the second playthrough, when you know what you're doing a bit more and you're kind of more attuned to it, it'd be a good fit, but I wouldn't recommend starting there.
I think, well, and especially if you're playing New Game Plus, not only do you have the new experience and getting used to the gameplay, but you have the weapons and the upgrades that you are used to. Something that I've taken away from subsequent playthroughs is that I was not relying upon the knife as much as I needed to in my first playthrough. I was using it to break boxes and you like get out of a jam, but like if you are pretty aggressive on the knife, it does well, especially when you get upgrades. It's really good to parry. It's really, if you do a perfect parry, you'll not only knock an enemy back, but like get to run up and kick him in the face or give him a suplex. If you crouch, you can do a lot of stealth stuff, which is also very useful. There's a lot, like and like none of that, like this is the weirdest thing talking about a game that's like, what, 18, 19 years old or whatever. I don't do math. It's new, but not. So like when a bad guy picks up Ashley, you can get a quick, easy kill just by running up to the back of the person and stabbing him with right trigger. So there's all these things that you can do with a knife that I think I was taking for granted, which made subsequent playthroughs easier. But also, I've played the game for 15 hours up before this, so maybe it's just I'm more aware of what's happening. I think generally you like the game more than I do. I think I've kind of I've softened up a little bit since you and I last had a quick chat about it. So do you want to summarize your thoughts first?
Yeah, I think I am correct about this game. Most people are a little too excited. But I think, well, we'll probably have to talk numbers. Like we normally don't, but it's with the scores this game got, I think we need to acknowledge it. So I gave it an 8 out of 10, which I think is a very reasonable score and fits this game perfectly from my point of view. Great game. We're holding it to the highest possible regard in terms of the original game, one of the greatest games, one of the most renowned and loved games of all time. And then the remake of Resident Evil 2, which kicked off this whole thing, one of the best remakes of all time. So we're kind of holding it, that's the bar. It's like the top of each thing.
Yeah.
And in that light, I feel like it played it very safe, and it could have done a little bit more. Probably following the backlash to Resident Evil 3 and how much content they cut, it seems like Capcom wanted to not risk anything and just kind of put in everything as it was. And so they have upgraded things. Combat is quite different, as you alluded to, but the flow of the game very much the same. They haven't really improved the story at the beginning, which was intentionally vague on the GameCube when it came out, like not really realizing that zombies were a thing. That was all part of it because that was the magazine days, right? Like there was some of that was kind of teased and things like that, but you didn't really know what the story was going in. At least I didn't. Now that's all known.
To the point where like the opening cutscene, you're looking at the guy at the fireplace and you're getting like the behind his back and trying to see, like figure out what happens as he turns to meet you, and you're expecting the original Resident Evil like zombie turn that's so famous in cutscene after cutscene. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, you're absolutely right on that front.
Yeah, and so they've decided to pretty much keep it identical, even though a lot of that's known, and they maybe could have explained it a little more. Like Leon's very aloof the first 5-6 hours, just kind of being like, "Man, these people are weird." Anyway, shoot them. And that's kind of part of it. Like it is explained as you go along, so I can kind of see where they did that. I don't mind it having played this game, but if it's mainly for new players, I feel like maybe they could have tweaked that. It's very nitpicky. Bigger issues is around like some of the clunkier moments. So there's a lot of epic moments in this game. They're still there. Some of the things which feel dated, if you were to go back and play the original, the lake monster fight really stands out as like the first thing you hit that just feels ancient. Feels exactly the same. Like they didn't improve that. Ashley being grabbed and running away and be like, "They help me, Leon." Like that's all still there. And it's just because they played it so safe. Like I feel like as a remake, there was maybe some scope to improve some of those things. Then on the flip side, what they have done though in doing that, if they've made a great version of Resident Evil 4, it's the best version. It's definitely what I'd recommend. And if you want to compare, go back and play the original for like 10 minutes or half an hour or something. It hasn't aged as well as you think. Like there's a version available on current gen platforms. In my mind, I kind of felt like, oh yeah, when they added the dual stick controls at some point, like it's better. Yeah, a little bit, but it still feels like an old game. They added a second stick to control the camera too, which is what they did. And like, so movement in this is still intentionally a bit clunky. That's Resident Evil style, but it's so much better than it was. And Leon has so much more in his kind of arsenal and what he can do. You mentioned the knife, like that's a big part of it. It makes it a lot more tense. It's a much darker game. The brown haze is gone, so it looks a lot better. It looks a lot more like what I kind of thought Resident Evil 4 was. Then you go back and play it, and it's a lot lighter and a bit more goofy than I recall it being. But that was all part of it. And it has lost some of that charm. Like the original game kind of starts with Leon having a couple of one-liners when the two cops sit in the car and they're both like, "Oh, we'll stay here and look after the car." And I can't remember what he says, but it's something kind of like, it's messing around with that, and that's kind of the tone. Much darker. They've taken that away. It's a bit more serious.
Except for like at the end of the demo when it finishes like, oh, what, everybody went to bingo. Like it tries to shoehorn in some like really old one-liners, which I don't think work, but sorry.
No, you're right. It does try to replace a few, but it's not to the same scale. And I think overall it's a darker game. Side characters like Luis are still a bit goofy. Like it's more kind of Leon Ashley's dynamic, and Salazar is a bit more. I mean, he's still weird and kind of a little maniac, but they take away the hat, like, so it's not quite the same. I'm sad he lost his hat. But yeah, otherwise, pretty good game. Like the game, this is definitely the version to play if you haven't played it before. I would slot it in between Resident Evil 2 as kind of the pinnacle. Resident Evil 3 a bit disappointing. It's right in the middle, and yeah, it's really good. I think it controls pretty well, except the aiming's a little bit dodgy, which I've now heard is maybe an Xbox only thing, so that might not be an issue on PlayStation. I got used to it though. So like by the time I was near in the second half of the game and closer to the end, the issues I were having early on, I don't know if maybe they did patch it at some point while I was playing. I don't think so, potentially. Or maybe I just started to get a bit better and I was a bit more in tune on how to hit those perfect headshots, because it's not quite the same as the original, but again, that's a bit of a nitpick. I feel like apparently you won't have that issue if you're playing on PC or PlayStation. I've since discovered.
Yeah, Digital Foundry was saying something about like dead spots, and I'm not sure if it includes like movement and aiming or one or the other. But from what I was quickly reading, it could be both. But I know what you mean about the headshots and stuff not working, and like you think you're gonna pop a head and you hit someone's shoulder, but it's that like Resident Evil 2 style. Yes, you can run and shoot, but if you plant yourself and aim, you'll do better. And you can see and you can see the crosshair like sort of like zooming in a bit, like so like if you give it a chance to like fully like meet in the center, like you're gonna hit where you think, and if not, maybe you're gonna go a little bit off to the side, which I kind of like. Like that's to me a modern take on the tank kind of controls of Resident Evil. I think your 8 is. We disagreed about this before. I think your 8 is accurate. I think it's a game that everyone should play. I think it pales in comparison to RE2. And I sort of regret giving RE3 an 8 because I probably would give that like a 7 if I had more time with it and I removed myself a little bit from the Resident Evil like obsessive fan that I am.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Like it's not bad by any stretch. Like it's not a poor remake. None of them are. Like I'm playing now, now that I know what's going on. I think I'm 1 hour in and I'm at chapter 5. So like the same argument for RE3 exists here. Like once you know what you're doing, you can just burn through this game, especially if you have enough money in your arsenal to buy a couple weapons, which greatly assist in the culling of. So I'm playing professional right now, and I'm that far ahead because I have an infinite insert powerful weapon here. You can probably guess what it is. Like I think the thing that bothered me the most is, especially coming off Dead Space, is that EA Motive with Dead Space and the remake, they found all the really bad pain points, like the stupid sit in a chair and shoot at asteroids that plagued so many people in the original. They just made it like a completely different thing in the remake, and now like the boat is a great example. A lot of the boss battles that didn't work are the same, and a lot of the boss battles that I thought were quite good in RE4 have like been changed to be like easier for some reason, where it's the ones that didn't change needed to be changed to be either easier or just like a different set of mechanics to make it more modern. Yeah, so like that's just Capcom they went like completely backwards on design decisions in my mind, which was really bugging me at the start. The thing about hardcore mode being recommended to anyone who's played RE4 before, that annoyed me as well. I think there's like sort of a knife tutorial in chapter 2 or 3, and I think maybe that could have been expanded upon so people really understood the power of the knife in comparison to what Capcom wants it to be, rather than you kind of like stumbling onto that fact far down the line.
You eventually figure out that you need to use it because you hit a point. It might have just been my playthrough, but I think there's a few kind of choke points where you just don't have enough ammo and you need to kind of crouch around. And it's not really a stealth section or anything, but it's just kind of you need to try to do that.
Necessity.
You don't have anything else.
Yeah.
And that does kind of teach you at that point, use the knife more. But it's probably a bit too late when that starts to happen. It either needed to be earlier or you just needed to be explained a little more, because the knife was a thing in the original game. It's just a very different thing here.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's not explained that well. Besides, like, the parrying is explained and it is very important. Also a little bit strange to have the parry alert like just above your health bar in the bottom right-hand corner. Not many games have that. And so when you do start thinking, oh, I should parry more, you basically just stand and wait for the enemy to attack you if there's only one or two of them.
Yeah.
You're just looking at the bottom of the screen.
You can't look at the main action because you need to be focused on the far bottom right corner of your screen, which is so frustrating. But it works. Like, as soon as you see that little LB, like, oh, you know what to do. And conversely, there's some like weird kind of like one-hit kills that like in comparison to what the parry shows you down the bottom corner, you get like some like front and center prompts that you just like, if you're just like a fraction of a second behind, like, there you go, reload. Like it sounds like I'm really like not pleased with this package, but it's pretty good. It's not pretty good. I'm enjoying it more. I'm obviously going back and finding some stuff. There's just so much bloat though that I wanted to talk about as well. Like, there's these new requests from the merchant, and if you play the original, you know about the blue medallions in a couple areas of the game. There's, I think, 6 of those areas now. There's 3 instances where you have to go and like shoot rats that are scampering around. There's all these like kind of weird fetch quests, and like if the ones that were repeated 6 times were maybe only once or twice, they wouldn't be so annoying. And then there's some like really clever ones where like you're supposed to go and deface a portrait, but it's not like you walk up to the portrait and shoot it. You got to figure out like, what's the little trick here? Like, there's a whole bunch of neat things that were added in, but like they get lost to just like the sense of padding that it kind of ends up as.
I feel like that's your play style as well, because these are kind of littered all over the place. As you say, there's 6 times the medallions. There's a few times where you've got to like kill some rats or things like that. This is all optional side quests that you can ignore. All it gets you is kind of a currency to trade for some specific items that you otherwise can't buy. And some of them are useful, but like a few of the most useful ones are treasure maps, just to find basically more of these things. And to get some cash, your other currency to buy at your weapon upgrades.
Yep.
There's the odd weapon, which is probably the most useful thing to take. Otherwise, like, you can pretty much play through the game, and I almost did, more or less, without getting any of that stuff. Like, the good stuff you would find, or you can buy normally. So you can do that, but you can also, if you're thinking it is too much padding, you don't have to do any of that.
Yeah, well, like the first, I guess the blue medallions in the original got you a weapon or 2. I think that sounds right. Maybe the red 9. I can't remember if that's right or not. But like, and even things like the shooting range is back, but it's now for like weapon charms, because, you know, if a game doesn't have a season pass, it has to have weapon charms and things dangling off your accoutrement. Like, it's just like, all right, it's just like you were sort of getting to at the start. Like, RE2 is just the pinnacle, and even the Resident Evil GameCube remake, really, in a completely different way, because they're completely different genres at this point. Almost like they are the pinnacles of how to do this. And Dead Space coming out was like the best practice middle ground, where it was safe but it wasn't too safe, and this is just too safe in many ways. Like, it's not aiming for the heights of RE2, like you said, probably because it got burned a little bit by RE3. Like, I think Capcom has to really be careful about what it does next, and I don't think like maybe a Code Veronica would get them over the line, but I don't think doing this same treatment for RE5 or RE6 would be as beneficial to them and to their bottom line as like RE9 would be, as an example.
I think these are all selling super well, and they're obviously quick to make. Like, we've got 3 games since 2019 that have all been remakes plus RE8. So it doesn't take them long. That's a big advantage for them.
Yeah. Well, I think RE3 was a different team for most of it.
Yeah,
I
right.
think
That might explain a lot.
the core team, the RE2 team, did RE4. I think they jumped on and helped with RE3 because it went a bit sideways. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, sorry to keep cutting you off, which I'm doing.
No, all good. Yeah, well, I would say I agree, but I think like it is safe in the same way, or more so than the Dead Space remake was. And yeah, so I think that holds it back from being that truly exceptional, great, all the tens that it's been getting. But I do think it's an excellent game still. Like it's a quality 8 out of 10. It's definitely worth playing. It's way better than the original to play now. The thing that it can't recapture, which maybe the best of the best remakes do, and I think Resident Evil 2 probably did, and that's recapture kind of the mood and the moment of the original, how important it was, and it kind of does it again. And so Resident Evil 4 was like, you had to be there at the time to really fully understand that. I think being a GameCube exclusive was part of it. It was on this console which didn't have games like this, and it wasn't on the console which had made this series.
Yeah.
And it ran like the GameCube version ran so much better than the PS2 version. Like it probably wouldn't have been the game it was if it had started multi-platform. And it was so different. Like it took the franchise in a totally different direction. It proved that you could do that and be super successful, which a bunch of other things have done after that. And so many third-person shooters, especially kind of more horror ones like this, have used the same kind of over-the-shoulder style. Like it's standard now.
Oh yeah,
so, like
Dead Space wouldn't
yeah.
exist without RE4, like
yeah,
at all.
and so that's the type of stuff which, and it's not really fair to say that the remake should try to recapture that. It can't really, but I think Resident Evil 2 remake in a way did. Like it reinvented it so well that it kind of it did it again to an extent. Which most remakes can't do, and they don't try to do it. And I think, yeah, Capcom purposely played it safe. They decided that's what they wanted to do. And for a lot of players, that was perfect. For me, very good. I'm very happy with it. Definitely play this game. If you haven't played Resident Evil 4 before, if you played it a bunch, I think almost everyone will love it. Really, really good, especially if you like the RE2 remake. I think you and I are saying that it's not quite reaching those same heights, but that's in comparison RE2 to RE2 remake. Like Resident Evil 4, it's Resident Evil 4 remake. It's not as big of a jump. So it also doesn't have as much of an opportunity to be.
Yeah.
Definitely play it. That probably brings us to why did it get so many 10s? Were we expecting that? I don't know if you have any thoughts on why. I think I can probably assume why so many people have done this. We could have asked some people. We know quite a lot of people that gave it a 10.
Well, the people that gave it a 10 are the ones who were like me. Well, I wouldn't have given it a 10, clearly, from what I've been saying. I think the ones who are giving it 10s are RE4 fans, true diehard fans that really wanted to play this early kind of thing. Which isn't to say like they're biased or anything. Like everyone's biased in a certain way, and this is a personal experience with the game that they're playing. I'm not trying to like be a jerk. I'm just saying it's people that have this very near and dear to their hearts, and it obviously resonated with them. What were you going to say?
Pretty much that. Pretty much what Resident Evil was to you, a lot of people have Resident Evil 2 was to you. A lot of people have done with Resident Evil 4. So I think you gave Resident Evil 2 Remake a 10. I think a lot of people had those same nostalgic kind of tug at the heartstrings, kind of return to their youth, just experiencing that all over again. And that's why it just clicked exactly what they wanted. And they wanted that really safe remake. And that I don't think I quite had that attachment to Resident Evil 4. One of my favorite games of all time. I did have it with like Metroid Prime, and I gave that a 10. Also an excellent remaster. Let's not get bogged down in the remaster versus remake debate. They're very different things. And these are one in each camp distinctly. So I like that. A game that knows which one it's trying to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what I think it's mainly down to that. People who wanted the safe remake. I'm assuming some of them were a bit disappointed with Resident Evil 3, and they think Capcom has gone back to what they should have been doing the whole time. Nothing wrong with that opinion. I think a lot of fans are going to agree, and I think a lot of probably going to agree with you too. And they're probably a little bit disappointed that they didn't do more. They didn't update some more stuff. They've added too much padding in. Overall, I think you'll find I'm right. 8 out of 10 was correct, and most people will enjoy this game. Think it's not quite as good as Resident Evil 2 Remake, which is a hard kind of bar to reach.
Yeah. Well, I think I was at a 7 when we were talking after, like, I think the time that you published your review, and I think after playing more and just being able to have more fun with it now that I've unlocked some extra modes and have a whole bunch of like PTAS behind me and like I'm just kind of mucking around, I think it's probably closer to an 8, maybe a 7.5. But like in comparison to RE2, well, one, the story is infinitely better. RE4, like it's a great game in terms of gameplay and what that meant to survival horror, to action games, to the franchise itself. But like the story is almost incoherent, and there was a bit of an opportunity for Capcom to maybe tweak some of that, and like nothing has changed. And if you're comparing it straight up to RE2, like the GameCube remake, the huge thing there was the Lisa Trevor added content and just like the graphical glow up, which we've talked about before. RE2, like Mr. X and everything around Mr. X was just so unexpected and so terrifying. Like that is so memorable in RE2. If you're thinking of things in RE4 that are like that Lisa Trevor or Mr. X like equivalent, that nothing exists. It's safe, which is fine, but that's the differentiation between like the 10 and the 8 in our review scale and that specific case.
Yeah, there's probably not as many iconic moments. There's definitely some iconic areas, and always when I played Resident Evil 4, the first kind of third was always my favorite of the game. And playing the remake, I felt exactly the same way.
Oh yeah,
I was probably least enjoying it in the midsection. So when it starts to get very culty, you've gone through the church, and there's a few kind of just like a bunch of enemies swarming you over and over again segments. You've had the escorting Ashley everywhere for a while, so that starts to get on your nerves. That's when I least like it. And it's also when you don't have that many weapon upgrades yet. Like you've got some, but you've got the mid ones. You've upgraded a few things, but the better like shotgun and the better whatever, it's all to come still. Which is when you suddenly start mowing down some of these enemies that were causing you trouble earlier. Like that does become better balanced as it goes along. And even though you do have to destroy heaps of enemies in the later sections, definitely more action focused in the original game. Not by a lot, but just like it's just skewed that way a little bit. Yeah, it's certainly, I feel the same way. So if you played the original game, that whole village section, which is that's the iconic moment of Resident Evil 4. Like
that's the reason they made Resident Evil 8.
Yeah, that's still the best, and it looks great. I think how they've remade that section in particular, awesome. Later on, yeah, probably the bits that didn't hit right the first time, if there were any for you, some people will love the game how it was, and you like the flow of Resident Evil 4. Which I did when I first played it. It's on subsequent replays that I've realized actually the thing I love about this game is the first third of it.
Yeah.
The last 2/3 still good, but it's not quite the same. You kind of reach a point where it's like, right, ready for this to be done now. And I think you're right. The story gets a bit incoherent. It's not that engrossing. But this is, again, it's all holding it to the highest bar of the best of Resident Evil. Like it's still very good. I prefer it to any of the later, the Village onwards, or Village and what was the one before Village? Biohazard, Resident Evil
7.
Yeah. 7. Yeah, I mean, I find those stories to be incoherent. Like, I don't really care about these new characters. So,
well, that's the thing. Like it's good. There are balancing issues more like beyond the weapon stuff that you were sort of talking about. I think, like you were also saying, there's certain points where just like no matter what you do, you've only got, I've put everything else in storage. I literally only have a handgun, and every enemy that I'm dropping, every box that I'm breaking open has money, and I just want, or like health, and I'm fine, but like I need a bullet. I need a bullet to put in my gun, but you don't get that. So it's like, okay, well, or I'd settle for resources that I can craft with gunpowder into bullets. No, I don't have bullets. And then you're wearing through the 3 knives you have because literally you can't get ammo, and you have to, and like it's, if this was Dead Space, it is very good about that. Like, oh, okay, well it's keeping those levels of tension high, so if you need health, you'll probably get health, but like it'll make it dangerous so you feel like you're in danger. If you're running low on ammo, eventually it'll give you ammo. There's something with RE4 right now that's just, it doesn't care. It doesn't care. It just gives you whatever it decided it was going to drop, and it doesn't take anything that's going on into account. Like, you need health, you need ammo, you need this. It's like, oh, here's a hand grenade. Oh, okay, maybe that's useful, but it's that there's something wrong there, and I don't feel like that was the case with RE4. Like, it was that same, I think that gave Dead Space its cues to like keep you on a very heightened, state of awareness the whole time, but like it was always manageable and not unfair, and this sometimes feels unfair in an unfun way as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I've had that often. There's definitely been a few times where I've just wasted a bunch of ammo because I'm doing the wrong thing, shooting the enemy in the wrong spot, and then I've kind of done it to myself, and I've gone back and reloaded because I've died or something, and then I've realized don't waste that ammo, and then I've ended up with stacks.
Ah,
Um,
well,
so, but not always. Like there are a couple moments where I had to go very knife heavy because I was going quite low on things, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's too often, and I often did have crafting materials. But yes, sometimes it's like, have you got everything you need? And you only need 2 items to craft weapons, but it's different types of things depending on what type of ammo you want.
yeah,
And often I had the one I didn't really want. It's kind of like I
yeah.
want shotgun shells or I want handgun ammo, like the two main things I'm using. And it's like submachine gun, that's all right, but I'd prefer not to waste my gunpowder on that. But that's all I can make at the moment. So I guess I will. Yeah, things like that.
I usually get rid of the TMP, and that's all I could make sometimes was submachine ammo. It's like, well, I don't even have the gun to use with
That's
submachine
why I
gun
kept
ammo.
it. Yeah.
And randomly, like it happened probably 5 or 6 times in one playthrough, like what I was just describing. And usually when that was happening, and I had to just attack people with a knife, that's always when the stupid guys' heads would explode, and it would be not the tentacle one, but like the really thick
The one that
one
comes in
with like the gaping
grabs it, yeah.
maw. Yeah. So it's like, oh, cool. So not only do I have nothing to shoot at this with, I have to get close and personal to like hack at it. And if I make a couple mistakes, I'm done. It was just, yeah, a bit frustrating in that sense. And I'm not bad at Resident Evil 4. I'm pretty sure I know how to play a Resident Evil game
Yeah.
in this stage of my life. So anyway.
Definitely harder. Definitely more tense. I would say more challenging for, in some ways, just because the controls are a little bit wonky, or it's harder to hit those perfect headshots. You have less ammo, I feel.
Yeah.
And then, but also because the enemies are tougher, like they rush you much quicker. And I think that's a good thing. It balances the fact that you can move a bit now. So that's probably kept in check. But they're way more aggressive. Like early on, the old lady with the pitchforks, like she's coming at you quick. And there's
Yeah.
probably more of them. So definitely more tense in the original game. The original one feels like the PG edit now. If you go back to it, like the version for kids that's a little bit nicer on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely tougher. And I think that's also why a lot of people loved it so much. Like they've gotten more like the experience that they remember, because when you first played Resident Evil 4, couldn't move around. Like you're probably playing on an old CRT, harder to see stuff. It was a challenging game. And then you played it on Wii with the perfect accuracy and you could just take headshots left, right, and center. And it was a bit easy.
Yeah.
And I think they wanted to make it a more challenging game. That's why they're telling you to play on hardcore. Even on standard on your first playthrough, it's still pretty tough. But yes, once you master knife combat, so if you want to have an easier time for yourself, focus more on learning how to use the knife well early on, and you probably will get through it. Like you'll breathe through much easier.
Yeah.
And yes, probably also know when to not run away, but like run back a bit, because Leon can walk back, but if you pivot and you do the 180 turn and just kind of run a little bit and then turn around and shoot, you buy yourself that little bit of space, which is the old way of playing Resident Evil 4, like fight or flight.
Yep.
Still do that here a bit. Like give yourself that bit of space, because when the head pops off and the big tentacle monster comes out and they can like whip at you from pretty far away, that distance can make a fair bit of difference.
Big time. Absolutely. It is good. It's really good. I feel like I'm being overly negative, but I feel like that's just me as an older grumpy man.
What's your favorite parts about it? You've said everything you don't like. What did you like?
My favorite parts about it, when things are when the in-game director, it's not Left 4 Dead, but like, you know what I mean, when that is working intentionally as it should be, and I feel like that doesn't happen all the time, but when that is working and you're just like you're scraping by on the skin of your teeth and you're, you know, jumping up and down platforms and there's like guys with machine guns flipping around at you and you're like somehow this like unstoppable one-man presidential daughter saving fiend. Like that's Resident Evil 4 original at its best, and that's it does come through in this one as well. So it's like when it's working, it's really, really working, and it's like there's no it's the feeling that you got when you were playing the original. It's you do get that in moments. I wish there were more of those, but like that does come through. How about you?
Overall, I like the whole thing. Like the start, I think is pretty strong. Like I think it's a much more accessible game, but a harder game, if that makes sense. Like it's easier to actually play, but it's way more challenging, and so it's definitely the version you should play. I think yeah, just that opening probably 2 hours it's still awesome. It's one of my favorite kind of scenes in all games, and they've captured that really well. Like they've remade that really well. They've gotten rid of some of the goofiness, and while it has lost some of its soul, some of it is better, and then it's very tense. Like it's definitely a challenge in that sense as well. Even just psyching yourself up to play it. There've been a couple of times when I was playing and it's 10 p.m. or something. I'm like, nah, too scary. Like I can't be that wide and then go to bed. Like not that many games do that anymore. So yeah, it's definitely it nailed the atmosphere. I think at least early on.
Yeah, there's one section in the castle, if you want me to name a specific place, where you fight a bunch of people in a room that's locked, and there's two like kind of mini bosses, and you can use, if you know what I'm talking about, you already know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, I'm trying not to spoil it. You can use the mini bosses to kind of like work in your favor because they are sight impaired, and if you are running in with a rocket launcher or something, yeah, there's no skill involved. But if you're trying to do it like how you think Leon would probably have to do it, like sneaking around, trying to be stealthy, like playing people against each other, there's a lot of fun to be had in that as well. So that was probably one of my favorite encounters, which is not too different from what it was in the original, but I think that translates very well with this kind of not really modernized, because it was pretty modern anyway, but like this more modern style of gameplay.
Yeah, and definitely a spot where there is a new autosave. So if you do die, you don't necessarily go back to your typewriter. So before that fight, you do go back to it just before, which I discovered because didn't realize what the enemies were initially. Just went in guns blazing and making any noise in there, or at least making that much noise, very bad for Leon. So took me a actually, I realized that straight away. It's my first death, what was going on, because you have encountered that enemy before at that point. And so, yeah, I definitely think that type of thing has translated really well. So as much as we've kind of said a few things are still clunky, some things have kept the same kind of DNA, the same kind of structure and style, and it translates to this new style of combat and atmosphere for the whole game really, really well. So definitely some improvements.
Nice. We're talking too long. A quick show's a good show. Let's finish up by, you wanted to talk about Crash Team Rumble, and you've asked what it is. And I don't think I can answer the questions. I don't know. Can you answer your own question?
No, that's why I'm giving it to you. There's like a 90-second trailer or something out today. It looks like Crash Bandicoot happens to be a bit Overwatchy, something like that, like a 5v5 type of thing.
Yeah, or like I had Rocket League in my mind. Like it's two teams trying to get points on each other, and you got to do. But yeah, maybe it is more Overwatchy. It's like it's definitely character class based, like character based with different skills. It's like every other version of this kind of game. Insert name of franchise here, which I don't really care about, if I'm being brutally honest. But
no, and so many big publishers like EA, I can't even remember their one. Their Knockout something or other, the one that they launched and then killed almost immediately. Whatever that was called, can't remember. Ubisoft has done one too. Like they're all this like 5v5 whatever, or 6v6 or 4v4 or whatever, and they're little to compete in the Overwatch space. Even though they're not trying to be exactly the same thing, they're free to play normally.
And this is not. But it's cheaper. I think it's like $45 or $60 depending on the special edition. So it's cheaper than a full priced game, but it's not free to play.
Okay. Well, on one hand, I'm glad that Crash is back. Like the remasters of the PS1 games, Crash Bandicoot 4, all really good, and they were just how the original game was, basically modernized and done again. Why don't they just stick to that? I'm not sure. I guess it's good they're trying to do something else. Like the franchise is not going to survive just kind of doing the same thing over and over. It's died before doing that, so maybe it's a good thing. I prefer Crash 5 though.
Yeah, or even like a Crash Team Racing. They've got 2 out of 3.
Which they did already. I mean, that was a remaster again.
Well, you could put Crash in like Spyro and Skylanders. Like Skylanders was cool without having to have all the weird toys and things. So maybe, I don't know, whatever. Toys for Bob has a plan, and we'll see if it pays off. I don't know.
Right. In that case, doesn't matter. Let's forget about that. We had a great chat about Resident Evil 4. If you're interested, go out and play it. I think it's out. Well, by the time this podcast is out, it's pretty much out. If not right now, in the next day or two, definitely play it. We would highly recommend it. You can check out our review on the site, or anyone else's if you want to see someone who loved it way more than we did. We really liked it. So that's how much praise this game is getting. But aside from that, I think that's all for this week, Steve. We'll be back next week. I don't know what we're going to talk about because there are games coming out, but we haven't played any of them. We've just been playing this one game this whole time. So
there you go. And I missed the AFL 23 launch party to hang out with you. Not that I really care about AFL, so it doesn't bother me. But
Yep.
I don't think we'd have had a chance to play that at this event, so I couldn't even talk about it. It wouldn't have been content, so
You'll
I
get
just
our
like,
thoughts on that at some point, maybe.
maybe, I don't know. I will talk to you soon, Ben, and we'll see everybody else next week.
We'll see you then.